The marriage wasn't real. The vows meant nothing. And the woman sitting beside the billionaire wasn't his wife. She was hired, paid to smile, paid to stay quiet, paid to disappear after one dinner. Everyone at that table believed she was harmless, a placeholder, a temporary solution. What none of them knew was this: she didn't come to impress them. She didn't come to belong. She came because she knew something about that family, something they had spent decades burying. And tonight, at that dinner table, the truth would finally breathe. Before we continue, I'd truly love to know where you're listening from. Drop it in the comments. If this story feels good so far, a gentle like really helps. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe and stay with us. Now, let's continue. The Man Who Bought Peace. Adrian Blackwell had never believed in love, at least not the kind people talked about. Love, to him, was inefficient, messy, dangerous. At 38, he was the CEO of Blackwell Group, a global investment empire built by men who valued control over comfort and power over emotion. Adrian had learned early that affection always came with conditions. So when his family demanded he show up to the annual Blackwell family dinner with a wife, he didn't panic. He calculated. The dinner wasn't about food. It never was. It was about hierarchy. Every year, the most powerful people connected to the Blackwell name gathered under one roof. Board members, silent investors, relatives who pretended to care about tradition but actually measured dominance with every word. And this year, Adrian was vulnerable. A merger was pending, control of the board was shifting, and whispers had started. He's unstable, too cold, no family values. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind from their last conversation. A man without a wife is a man without anchors. Adrian hated that sentence, but he understood the threat behind it. So he made a decision, not an emotional one, a strategic one. The offer. Her name was Elena Moore. She walked into his office exactly on time. No hesitation, no nervous energy. She wore a simple black dress, minimal makeup, and an expression that suggested she had already decided not to be impressed. Adrian noticed that immediately. "I'll be honest," he said, without standing up. "I'm not looking for romance." Elena nodded. "Good, neither am I." That surprised him. He slid the folder across the desk. "One public appearance, one family dinner. You act as my wife, nothing more." Elena opened the folder and read carefully. There were clauses about silence, confidentiality, public behavior. Then the number at the bottom of the page. Her lips pressed together for a half second. "Why me?" she asked. Adrian leaned back. "Because you don't look like someone who falls in love with the idea of this." Elena looked up at him. "And you don't look like someone who understands women very well." He smirked. "That's why I'm paying you." Elena closed the folder. "I'll do it." No excitement, no celebration, just agreement. But before she stood, she added, "There's one thing you should know." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "I'm very good at reading rooms," she said calmly, "and families like yours always hide fractures." He studied her for a long moment. "As long as you don't expose them," he replied. Elena smiled faintly. "I won't expose anything that deserves to stay hidden." The rules. On the drive to the estate, Adrian went over the rules. Minimal speaking, no opinions, no personal stories. Elena listened quietly. "And one more thing," he added. "My family can be cruel." She looked out the window. "I've survived worse than cruel." He almost asked what she meant. Almost. The house. The Blackwell estate didn't look like a home, it looked like a monument. Stone pillars, cold lights, generations of wealth carved into architecture. As they stepped inside, conversation slowed, eyes turned, judgment arrived before introductions. "This is my wife," he said, his hand firm around Elena's waist, a lie spoken confidently enough to feel real. His grandmother's eyes narrowed first, then his aunt's, then his cousin's smile sharpened. Elena felt it, the silent calculation. She was being measured and already found lacking. The first cut. Dinner began politely, too politely. "So, Elena," his aunt said, lifting her wine glass, "what exactly do you do?" The tone was light, the intent was not. Adrian expected Elena to deflect. She didn't. "I work in crisis analysis," Elena replied. "I help people navigate moments where one wrong move can destroy everything they've built." A pause. His grandfather leaned forward slightly. "That must be stressful." Elena met his gaze. "It is," she said softly, "but watching people pretend their problems don't exist is worse." The table went quiet. Adrian felt a flicker of unease. This wasn't in the contract. The look. As dessert was served, Adrian leaned toward her and whispered, "Careful." Elena didn't look at him. "I am," she whispered back. "I just don't confuse careful with silent." For the first time that night, Adrian realized something. He hadn't hired a decoration. He had invited a variable, and variables were dangerous. By the time the car stopped in front of the estate, Elena already knew one thing. This dinner wasn't about family. It was about control. The house rose behind iron gates like a silent witness, old money, old secrets, and walls that had heard too much over the years. Golden lights glowed behind tall windows. Everything about the place was designed to intimidate. Daniel Blackwood stepped first, billionaire, heir, and the man who had hired her. "Remember," he said calmly, not looking at her, "you smile, you nod, and you let me handle everything." Elena adjusted the ring on her finger, the one he had placed there 2 weeks ago during a signing session, not a proposal. "I remember the contract," she replied softly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's all this is." They walked in together. The moment the doors opened, conversation stopped. Eyes turned, judgments formed. And somewhere between the chandeliers and the polished marble floor, Elena felt the weight of being evaluated. Daniel's mother stood first, Margaret Blackwood. Her posture was perfect, her smile was not. "So," she said, stepping closer, eyes scanning Elena from head to toe, "this is the wife we weren't told about?" Elena smiled, warm, controlled, respectful. "It's lovely to finally meet you," she said. Margaret didn't return the smile. Instead, she turned to Daniel. "You've been full of surprises lately." Daniel squeezed Elena's hand, not affection, but warning. Dinner was announced. They took their seats at the long table. Elena was placed exactly where she was meant to be, beside Daniel, but never truly included. The first 10 minutes were harmless. Talk of business, market trends, a cousin bragging about a merger. Then the questions began. "So, Elena," Margaret said casually, swirling her wine, "what exactly do you do?" Elena met her eyes. "I work in strategic consulting." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Impressive. And before that?" "I worked where I was needed." A pause. Margaret smiled thinly. "Of course you did." Laughter followed, polite, practiced. Daniel didn't intervene. He was watching the table, not her, as if measuring how long she would last. Another voice joined in. Daniel's uncle leaned forward. "How did you two meet?" Daniel opened his mouth. Elena spoke first. At a charity event, she said, smoothly. He was late. I was bored. A few chuckles. Daniel looked at her, surprised. Margaret's eyes sharpened. And what made you marry him so quickly? Elena took a sip of water. Then she said, he didn't need convincing. Silence. Daniel shifted in his chair. Margaret smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. My son is very particular. I've noticed, Elena replied gently. The air changed. Not loud, not obvious, but tight. Dinner continued, but something had shifted. They underestimated her. Halfway through the main course, Margaret placed her fork down. Daniel, she said, there's something we should discuss. Daniel stiffened. Not tonight. Margaret ignored him and turned to Elena. You see, our family values tradition, stability. We don't take kindly to temporary arrangements. Elena didn't blink. I agree, she said. Temporary things tend to fall apart. Margaret leaned closer. So tell me, dear, how long do you plan on staying? Daniel spoke sharply. Mother. Elena raised her hand, politely. Until I'm done, she said. The table went quiet. Daniel turned to her slowly. What does that mean? Elena smiled. The same smile she had practiced in the mirror, the same smile she was being paid to wear, but this time there was something else behind it. Meaning. Nothing you need to worry about, yet. For the first time that evening, Daniel looked uncertain, and for the first time since she arrived, Elena felt it. Power. Because what Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she hadn't come to survive this dinner. She had come to expose something. And dessert hadn't even been served yet. Dessert arrived like a distraction no one needed. Silver trays, crystal glasses, forced smiles. But the room hadn't relaxed. It was holding its breath. Elena noticed it first. The way Margaret's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her spoon, the way Daniel avoided looking at her now, the way conversations restarted, but none of them sounded natural anymore. This wasn't curiosity, it was fear. Margaret cleared her throat. Elena, she said lightly, you seem very confident for someone new to this family. Elena tilted her head. Confidence comes from clarity. And what are you clear about? Asked Margaret. Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the table, slowly, intentionally, at the uncle who kept checking his phone, at the cousin whose smile never reached his eyes, at Daniel, who was suddenly very interested in his wine glass. I'm clear about why I'm here, Elena said. Daniel's voice cut in. This isn't appropriate. Margaret raised a hand. Let her speak. That was the mistake. Elena reached into her clutch. Daniel stiffened. What are you doing? He asked quietly. Finishing the job, she replied. She placed a small envelope on the table. Not dramatic, not rushed, just deliberate. Margaret stared at it. What is that? Something you buried, Elena said, and something you thought no one would ever connect back to this family. Silence fell heavy. Daniel's face drained of color. Elena, stop. She looked at him then. Really looked. You hired me because you thought I was harmless, she said softly, because you thought I was temporary. Margaret's voice sharpened. Explain yourself. Elena slid the envelope toward her. Open it. Margaret hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Daniel stood abruptly. Mother, don't. Margaret opened it. Her eyes scanned the contents. Once, twice. Then her hand froze. The room changed. The cousin leaned forward. What is it? Margaret closed the envelope slowly, too slowly. Elena, she said, her voice tight. Where did you get this? Elena leaned back in her chair. I didn't come to impress you, she said calmly. I came because 15 years ago, a company was shut down quietly. Records vanished. A woman lost everything. Daniel's breathing was shallow now. That woman, Elena continued, was my mother. The words hit like glass shattering. Daniel whispered, "That's impossible." Margaret stood. "You should leave," she said. Elena shook her head. "Not yet." She looked around the table again. That company didn't fail. It was destroyed on purpose to protect an acquisition, to protect this family's name. The uncle stood too. "This is absurd." Elena smiled, not kindly this time. Funny, because the documents say otherwise. Bank transfers, shell accounts, signatures. She looked straight at Daniel. "Your father's signature." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, chairs scraped, accusations flew. Daniel stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. "You hired me to get close," he said quietly. "No," she corrected. "You hired me to disappear. I just chose not to." Margaret slammed her hand on the table. "You think exposing this will fix anything?" Elena stood. "I don't think, I know." She picked up her clutch. "I didn't come for money or revenge." She met Daniel's eyes one last time. "I came for the truth." And with that, Elena turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving behind a family unraveling, a billionaire who realized too late what he'd invited into his life, and a secret that was no longer buried. But the real shock? It hadn't happened yet, because what Elena planned next would cost Daniel far more than his reputation. It would cost him control. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The house was silent, but his mind wasn't. Every word Elena had spoken replayed itself, every look, every pause. He had hired her to survive a dinner. Instead, she had dismantled a dynasty. By morning, the lawyers were calling. Board members wanted answers. Old partners were suddenly unreachable. And the documents Elena left behind? They were real. His father's signature was undeniable. The company collapse 15 years ago, the one whispered about but never acknowledged, had been engineered. A sacrifice made to secure a merger, a woman destroyed so a family could rise. Daniel stood in his office staring at the city he thought he ruled. For the first time, it looked unfamiliar. By noon, the press had picked up rumors. By evening, investors were nervous, and by nightfall, Daniel realized something worse than scandal was unfolding. Elena hadn't exposed everything, not yet. She had only shown them enough to panic. Daniel found her the next day in a quiet cafe, far from cameras and polished boardrooms. She looked calm, unbothered, like someone who had already made peace with the outcome. "You planned this," Daniel said, sitting across from her. Elena looked up. "I prepared for it." "You used me." She didn't deny it. "You used me first." The words weren't angry, they were factual. Daniel leaned forward. "What do you want?" Elena stirred her coffee slowly. "I want the truth acknowledged, publicly. I want the people hurt by your family's decisions to be compensated, and I want your father's name removed from every foundation and legacy project built on lies." Daniel swallowed. "And if I refuse?" Elena met his gaze. "Then what you saw at dinner was only the beginning." He believed her, because he finally understood something that terrified him. Elena didn't need him anymore. She never had. Daniel agreed, not because he wanted to, because he had no other move left. The press conference a week later shook the industry. Campbell Holdings admitted to past misconduct. Funds were established. Names were removed. Daniel stood at the podium alone, no family behind him, no legacy to hide behind. And somewhere in the crowd, Elena watched, unseen, unacknowledged. When it was over, she didn't approach him. She didn't need closure from him. She had already reclaimed what mattered. Months later, Daniel received one final envelope. Inside was a single note. "You hired me to play a role. I came to end a story. Ours is finished." There was no signature. Daniel folded the note carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. For the first time in his life, he understood what real loss felt like. Not money, not power, control. And Elena? She walked away with something far more valuable than revenge. She walked away free. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. A gentle like helps these stories reach more listeners, and if you'd like to stay with us, subscribing means a lot. I'd truly love to know where you're listening from. Drop a small hello in the comments.